Yeah, so my name is Shelley Worrell. I was born in Flatbush. Both my parents lived on Flatbush and Martens when I was born. So I've lived most of my life in the neighborhood between Flatbush and East Flatbush. I'm also the founder of Caribbean, and we were the organization that led the development of Little Caribbean, which is also here in Flatbush, East Flatbush, and Prospect Lefferts Gardens. And I still live here. I live on one of the greenest blocks in Brooklyn. And I think that the biggest change that I'm seeing is gentrification and the displacement of Black and brown people, particularly people of Caribbean descent. So you're seeing a lot of people who are being displaced from their homes, from their apartments. So the neighborhood is definitely changing and shifting in that way. We also have a lot more amenities than we had before. So if you think about things, which we love, of course, King's Theater, but that, was sort of an abandoned building for a very long time. Even if you look at some cafes and the restaurants that we have in the neighborhood, those didn't really exist before. I mean, of course, we had restaurants and corner stores and things like that, but the pace of gentrification is, I would say, the biggest shift that I see in the neighborhood. It was always a very diverse and Caribbean community from my lens, right? So I always felt like we had a really broad representation and diverse representation of the Caribbean community. So you have neighbors and friends from the entire Caribbean diaspora. So whether it's Trinidad, which is where my family's from, Jamaica, Haiti, Barbados, Grenada, St. Vincent. So there was always this really, really large concentration of Afro-Caribbean people and families that lived here. And of course, with that, you had a lot of really great food in the restaurants or even in the local shops and markets. You were exposed to all of that from a very early age. It's been great. I mean, this is home. I have someone who tells me all the time, like my navel cord is buried here. I don't know if I'm that tethered to the place, but I actually really love living in the neighborhood because of, the diversity, its proximity to the parks, to the gardens. You were able to get to the city pretty quickly. I happen to live in a townhouse, so I have two gardens that I can enjoy and sort of get away from the hustle and bustle. So I actually do love living here in Flatbush. Definitely the people, the Caribbean people, the food. So whether that's through local restaurants or me going shopping at like Le Bay Market to make a Sunday lunch or a Saturday dinner, being able to have access to the foods that I grew up eating and my family grew up eating is extremely one of the things I think that makes me feel really, really grounded here in Flatbush. My mother makes callaloo a lot, so when she comes, we go to Le Bay Market to buy all of the ingredients. I love currants rolls. So of course, on the same block of Le Bay is Allen's Bakery, which I don't ever remember not going to. It's been a part of my entire life and existence, and still very much a part of it. I love jerk chicken, so there's Peppa's. I love patties, and there's a real diversity of patties in the neighborhood. So if I want a Haitian patty, I'll go to Immaculée or to La Baguette. If I want a Jamaican patty, I might go to Ital Fusion or Veggies on Nostrand. If I want a juice, there are a lot of juice bars, scoops, ice cream at Cream and Cocoa, Taste of Tropics. So everything is here. It's like within like a 2 to, I would say, 15 to 20 minute like walk. I really enjoy the neighborhood and all of its diversity, not only in terms of the Caribbean itself, but also the housing stock. Though I will say I hate the tall buildings that are going up. I mean, those are really annoying and really changing the entire feel and look of the neighborhood. So I wish those would stop and go away. Caribbean started off as, our first program was the Flatbush Film Festival because my background is in TV and film, and our co-founder as well as a filmmaker. So naturally we would go into film. And one of the things that I found is that I didn't have access to films, and not only me, but the community did not have access to films that represented themselves, like their experiences and their lives. So we started off as a film festival, and then, I love art, so we very quickly, the following year we added exhibitions, and then we also cultural performances, and from there, we just continued to grow and build and iterate. We built the Caribbean House, and from there I started spending a lot more time on the ground here in the neighborhood, and that's when Little Caribbean sort of came to me, because I saw the neighborhood starting to gentrify, and really saw, I was really concerned about the displacement of the community, but also of the preservation of a community that has been living here since the 1960s into the 70s, and really, starting to thrive, from the 80s onward, as people started to become more settled here and acclimated. So our work sits at the intersection of Caribbean, we say culture, community, and commerce. And by commerce, we mean the small businesses of Little Caribbean that we continue to support and uplift, because, one thing I say is, if some of the businesses that I consider to be institutions and anchors of this neighborhood, like Allen's, like La Bay Market, like Peppa's, if those go away, then I'm going away too. There was a deficit, right? There was a gap. I didn't see myself. There was lack of representation. It was the same thing like Little Caribbean. Like, why do we live in a city where there are, all of these other designations, but the Caribbean community could not have their own? So we have 3 Chinatowns in New York. There are two little Italys, but we didn't even have one Little Caribbean. So it didn't make sense to me. Especially given that we have such a significant population here and diverse. New York City is composed of 20% of New Yorkers are of Caribbean descent, which is a very, very big number out of 8.8 million people. So it's always been about lack of representation. So, and seeing ourselves, through the arts, through storytelling, through communities, through tours, through food, all of those lenses. So we do a lot of programming in Prospect Park and Brooklyn Botanical Gardens. We have an annual holiday market that we run in the park, or at least it has been for a couple of years. It's great to see people come in and say, we've been following you since this container was at the Brooklyn Museum, or since it was at Parkside Plaza, or even since it was at the Caton Market, which is where it was born. So, our community continues to show up at different aspects of our work. Some people really want to engage with film, others may want to engage with exhibitions, others may want to engage with our merch by buying a sweatshirt or a keychain or some other thing that we're selling. Or they just may love the Caribbean House, which is a mobile arts, cultural, and community space. So being, sort of like hearing that, or even getting emails, DMs on our social, which we get a lot. This morning, we had someone who reached out via email saying, I love your work, I've been following it for many, many years, and I would like to get involved. By pulling up, they show up to our activations, they reach out to us, even via social. We were together, but apart during the pandemic, and that was another moment when we saw the community really sort of huddled together to make sure that we were sustaining not only Flatbush, but Caribbean culture, community, and commerce in Brooklyn and beyond. Community.
Why would you pick community?
Because there's still a lot of it that feels very small town to me. So when I walk certain parts of different corridors, whether I'm walking on Flatbush, on Nostrand, on Cortellier Road, I feel at home. Like, people actually are like, hi, Shelley. Like, they know me, I know them. And for me, that's community, especially in Brooklyn. We have 2.8 million people who live in this borough. We're the coolest place in the world. And to still have that sense of like small town USA is community. And I think that makes the neighborhood extremely special and unique. Though, as I said, I think that's shifting quite a bit. I'm very inspired by my community, yeah. I hope that we don't get too gentrified where we lose our soul, and it feels like less of a community. It feels like downtown Brooklyn, or just a neighborhood that has no vibe or no soul. There are concerns about our culture, our community, our people as well. So I'm concerned because, for example, I'm not seeing a lot of new Caribbean home buyers, right? Most of the people who are buying in the neighborhood are not of Caribbean descent. We have people who are coming to us asking, how can we help them buy a house or find an apartment, or they're afraid that they can't afford to live where they grew up. I just had a meeting with someone this week who's trying to buy back her parents' home on Sterling. And when she goes on her old blocks, she said she feels like a stranger. People look at her like she's crazy. And she grew up there. That's where she was born, and she used to ride a bike there, and her bike, and play double dutch, she told me. And now when she goes there, she feels weird that she can't even go on the block where she lived for many years. So, I feel like that's going to continue to happen, and I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about the Victorians being torn down and people building ugly, expanding their homes by building on top of them, and what that means for the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I also am concerned that people are coming into the neighborhood and they're not really understanding where they are, right? And sort of ignoring the community that built, at least in part, and maybe not. I mean, of course, we're not the Lenapes or the original inhabitants of this land, but they, for the last several decades, built this community. So those are some of my concerns. I don't know that we can stop it. I mean, you can't stop development. I'm not sure that that's within my power or something that I even want to take on. So I don't think it's good for my mental health for me to sort of take that burden on my shoulders. But I'm not sure. I haven't really thought about how we can stop something. I just think about how I can sustain my work in my community. There's a thriving culture that is here on the ground in Flatbush, and I think that we should all access it and enjoy it. So, for example, when it's Juve, I think that we should all celebrate and enjoy, and or let our neighbors do that comfortably and in a way that's authentic to their heritage. So yeah, I would say culture is a thing that I would want to share more of, and food. I mean, the food is abundant; it's everywhere. And food is culture.